Hello, good evening, and welcome to another Wine Society online session. With me, Ewan Murray, and my colleague here, Gil Riggansl. We're from the Tastings and Events team at the Society. For those of you who are maybe joining us for the first time, and as a reminder to our more habitual offenders, we'll be chatting around the subject matter and also reacting to your comments and questions as we go, as and when and if they arise. Please do use the chat function for that. Let us know who you are, who you're with, where you are, which of the wines you're tasting, if any, and whether you're eating along with them as well. You can chat amongst yourselves there too. And as I said, do ask us any questions either there or in the Q&A function. So we look forward to seeing those as we go along. Shin of beef and carpaccio to go. Oh, Colin, you've got us going already. So if you have to disappear early or are you rudely interrupted by a knock at the door or an important phone call, then never fear, we are recording this session. So it will appear on our YouTube channel after the weekend, and we'll send an email through to you, to all people who've registered for this event, to tell you what that link is, so you can always catch up then. For those of you who are catching up and didn't make the original live recording, then welcome to you too. Right, well, this Monday, 14th of April, is World Tannat Day. So we thought that in a timely fashion, we may dig a little deeper into this grape variety. Quite not that well known. You know, if you say to a bunch of people, what are the red grape varieties, you know, all the ones will come off the top of the head: the Merlot, the Cabernets, maybe Zinfandel, Pinot Noir, etc., etc. But Tannat will probably come quite a way down the list. We mentioned that we would be looking at 5 Tannat wines, Tannat based. I think they're all 100% Tannat, actually, the wines we've got.
Yes.
So we've got them lined up here, 5 of them, and we'll be looking at them as we go. But firstly, a bit of an introduction to Tannat. It's a native of the southwest of France. The first written record of it was found, just checks notes, 1783, unsurprisingly in Madiran, where it's still the dominant grape variety today. Tannat used to be spelt with 1 N, for those of you who are interested in etymology. It's now with 2 N's since the middle of the 19th century. It's 2 N's. Probably stems from the word Tannat, funnily enough, from the language of Oc, the Pays d'Oc, which basically means tanned. And they don't know whether it means tanned due to the dark color of the grape or the slight sort of brown sheen that comes onto the grape, onto the vine leaves as well. But anyway, it's Tannat. Tannat refers also to you'll know, I say Languedoc, I meant Béarnais. Excuse to any Béarnais who are listening. It's the Béarnais dialect, so not dissimilar, but we're at a slightly different part of the Pyrenees. In the 2012 book Wine Grapes, some of you may have known it. It's a massive tome written by Jancis Robinson, MW, Julia Harding, MW, and José Bouillarmeau, who is a Swiss. He's the world expert on vines, grapes, and leaves. And they put together this tome. It's huge, and it records 1,368 grape varieties. Tannat being just one of those grape varieties. Those are the grape varieties that are known to be making commercially available wines in all around the world. And one of the bits that I love about this book is that it's full of family trees. It's got a whole bunch of genealogy to do with the grapes and where they stem from. One of the things I love less about Tannat is that it's slightly less sure where it all stems from. But having said that, it's part of, there are 16 families of grapes in France. There are 204 grape varieties in France. There are 16 families, and this is from the Courbu family. Courbu is another local grape. So they're all based in the southwest of France, red grape. So they're all part of that family. So you've got Tannat, you've got Courbu, you've got Monsan Noir, and 3 or 4 others in that family. They're all, which are all really Gascon and Pyrenean stalwarts. The grape Tannat itself is generally, as you can probably see if you've got any of the wines poured out in front of you, quite dark in color, you know, pretty opaque stuff, really. It's usually got bags of tannin, loads of acidity as well. It's a powerful wine in general, and it's definite laying down material. Now, when I say laying down, I mean the wines rather than the people who are drinking it, although, depending on how much. Its natural home is in Madiran on clay-based soils with a little bit of alluvial gravel or glacial gravel coming off the Pyrenees. Traditionally, wines from Madiran and from the Tannat grape in general were pretty undrinkable, just because of that tannin level. But nowadays, some Madirans and many of the region's neighboring wines, which are also Tannat based, they're a lot softer. They're made to be a lot softer. We're talking of the wines of Madiran, of the Béarnais, of Tursan, of Uruguay. They can be made in a much softer style. The less clay and the more sand and gravel in the soils, generally the softer and more approachable and accessible the wine is. I don't know whether you've ever knowingly drunk a Tannat from France. If you had a glass of Madiran or a glass of Saint-Mont, then you will have done. In Madiran, Tannat has to make at least 60% of the blend. You can have other grapes in there. Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and Fer Servadou are the most common ones. If the third one seems less familiar to you, but you have drunk our Marcillac, Le Sang de Pays from the Domaine du Cros, then you will have drunk Fer Servadou 100%. But you'll find Tannat also in neighboring Uruguay, Béarn, Tursan, Côte de Bruyant, and Brulois, and Cahors as well. You can find it in Cahors too. We've just had a little comment about the tasting order. Just to say, we'll be starting with the Deux Vaches, then we'll be moving on to the Madiran itself, the Odé dédi, and then we'll move on to the two Uruguayans. Firstly, the Lucca Tannat, and then the Pisano Family Reserve, and then we'll finish off with the Maydie. So that's the order of the wines. Now, you will all know, as seasoned wine drinkers, that drinking red wine is good for your health, allegedly, in moderation. It's due to something called, it's the antioxidants basically, but the procyanidins, known to be preventative agents against cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. You'll be pleased to know that these wines tonight, all being made from the Tannat grape, have the highest level of these, almost 3 times as much as a claret. So please drink more Tannat. The Gers department, the French county neighboring Madiran, I've learnt has double the French average of nonagenarians. So I think proof is in the drinking there. So keep drinking Tannat, and we'll still be around for a real while longer. Now, while Tannat's home is in the southwest of France, most of the Tannat planted down there, 3,000 hectares. There is a small amount over the border in the Basque country, the Spanish Basque country, the País Vascos. There's a little bit in Sicily, in the US, in Canada, in Australia, Switzerland, South Africa, and Japan, apparently. But its true second home is Uruguay, and we'll be tasting a couple of Uruguayan examples later. It's the most widely planted grape in Uruguay, with almost 2,000 hectares, or 22% of all grapes planted in Uruguay. So it's why is that? It's a really weird thing. It's a bit like Malbec coming over to Argentina, and Merlot / Carmener in Chile, and somebody's just come up to say you can get a good Tannat wine from Peru. You're right, I missed out Peru. And when it comes to South America, there is a little bit in Argentina and Brazil and Peru. There is a Tannat from Peru, but there was the end of the 19th century, middle to the end of the 19th century, there was a group of Basque immigrants that came across the Atlantic and found a climate not dissimilar to theirs, just on the other side and the lower hemisphere. And one of these guys was called Pascal Arriague, and he brought over with him some vine cuttings, some Tannat vine cuttings. And near the city of Salto, in the north of Uruguay, about 400 kilometers north of Montevideo, and we've got a map a little bit later when we start talking about those Uruguayan wines, he planted those first vines. And in fact, Tannat, until the early 20th century, was known in Uruguay as Arriague. And why do we celebrate International Tannat Day on the 14th of April? That's because it was Pascal's birthday. So on Monday, it will be Pascal Arriague's 206th birthday. So we'll raise 5 glasses to him tonight. Anyway, moving swiftly on, well, that's enough about the grape variety in itself. I'm going to pass over to Gil, who's going to say a little bit about the Laplace family, from where the first 2 wines come, and then we'll be talking about the wines and tasting them. So Gil, over to you.
Thank you very much. And also, I think I just saw pop up a member saying that this wine is delicious. I'd love to know which wine particularly that you're talking of. But whilst Ewan is just bringing up a slide to show the first wine, as he mentioned, we're looking at Deux Vaches Rouges, so the 2 cows, and it's from Famille Laplace. Actually, I think wine 1, 2, and 5 are all from the same family. The Laplace family, they're based and iconic, really, and very synonymous, and a very important family for the production of Tannat wines in and around Madiran. One thing that I think, Ewan, and correct me if I missed this there, but Madiran as a region gained its appellation status in 1948.
Yep.
I can't remember if
it was 47, 48. That time,
48 there. About 21 or so years, about 20 years before then, in 1927, that's when the Laplace family sort of history begins in the region. So they predate the appellation status, and they really are champions of this grape variety and the region itself. So Famille Laplace, as I say, they were founded in 1927. It was Frédéric Laplace who owned the vineyards surrounding and cultivated the vineyards surrounding a Château d'Ady in the hamlet of Ady, which is about a few kilometers northwest of the village of Madiran itself, and very much within the heartland of the AOC as it is now, just this area here. Hopefully you can see the red cursor going around that region, so Madiran and its surrounding Terre Saint-Simon, and Bierne just a little off to the west, which Ewan also mentioned. So 1927, Frédéric started sort of cultivating, took ownership of, not of the chateau at this point, that was in 1982 that they acquired the chateau as well, but was in charge and owned the vineyards and cultivation. In 1952, his son Pierre took over the reins at the helm, and he very much sort of replanted lots of the vineyards. Here's some of the vineyards in question, replanted in the early 50s and 60s, and really helped modernize the winery and modernize the practices. Then in the 70s, so early 1970s or 71, Pierre's children, so first his son Jean-Luc, and then his brothers, Bernard and Francois, and then their sister Marie, all started to join the family domain, so in those early 70s. And it's that third generation that really spearheaded this sort of look at planting Tannat in particular, alongside other varietals, but in a multitude of different soil types, different terroir, different aspects, slopes, and really found in sort of 1975, they came to the realization that Tannat grown in limestone, clay limestone soils really produced for them the best quality, the most structured, the most longevital, I suppose, if that's a word. Have I just created longevital?
Hey, it is now.
I don't know, it's a Friday evening. But it was in those sort of 70s, and that sort of gave them the edge, I suppose, or step up. But they were doing that before any other producers in the region. They were looking at these different pockets, because the whole area of Madiran and Bierne, there's very a huge range of different terroirs, a huge range of soils that we have here. So that was quite a key area, and that third generation really took Tannat and took the region to that next level. As I said, they bought the chateau itself, the vineyards surround in 1982, and Château d'Ady is on the label of our second wine, and indeed third. The reason why the chateau is not mentioned on our first wine, if I can show that, I'm not sure if we can stop sharing so I can
stop sharing.
Show the bottle.
Oh, I've stopped sharing. The screen hasn't done anything here. There we go.
We pop onto that. Yep.
There we are.
There we are. We were still seeing the screen. But here's the bottle here. So the Deux Vaches. This comes from Famille Laplace, because the grapes themselves here come from outside of the Madiran appellation. They come more from the Bierne region mentioned, and we saw that on the map. And actually, Bierne as a region itself is its own appellation. It produces red, white, and rosé wines. And like in Madiran, for the red and the rosé, it has to have a minimum of 50% in this instance, 50% Tannat. The rest is typically Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc topped up. But you can also get that Fer, as you mentioned there, Manseng Noir, as well as another varietal. But this particular one is 100% Tannat.
Courbu Noir, I think it was. Yeah.
But as Ewan, as you said right at the beginning there, all 5 of these are 100% Tannat. This is no exception. And I think you mentioned about that micro-oxygenation. And for me, the wine is very approachable. It's very rounded. And that's a kind of a note I think I'm going to say on 2 or 3 of these wines. So I think possibly a little of that micro-oxygenation, those controlled levels of oxygen into the wine production, just to really soften the tannins, integrate those tannins beautifully. And it's an incredibly plush, fruit-forward style. I think it's tremendous. It's got a beautiful nose, wonderful character. Here's the notes again here. So yeah, generosity, definitely. Ease of drinking, but in a very, very positive manner. It's got depth, it's got complexity, and it definitely has that generosity of fruit.
But for £10.50, all of that.
And that's tremendous for £10.50. But yeah.
Excuse me.
But it's also the case here is like in Madiran, so Béarn, we've got the temperatures here are nice and sort of temperate. So we have warm summers and quite mild winters, but rainfall is fairly consistent throughout the year. However, we do have the fortune,
the misfortune of spilling a glass of Tannat on it. Excuse me.
The good fortune, in terms of viticulturally, is that late summer, early autumn, it's very dry. So those rains sort of halt, and that just allows the grapes to ripen slowly, more consistently. And so what we're left with is this extra hang time. So the grapes have fully ripened, the tannins have fully ripened as well. So we're not getting any of that green stalkiness at all, but wonderfully kind of, as I say, plush, generous fruit. And I just think this is an absolutely terrific wine. And Ewan, I'm so sorry that that's happened.
So am I. But anyway, let's, here we go. It's all right. That was just, I was going to change my trousers when I got home anyway, so there's no harm done there. But no, a delicious wine. It has got those tannins, but it's the softness of the wine. It's really quite sort of plush, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
Sort of sitting back in one of those velveteen 1970s sofas and just sort of with your suede shoes on or whatever it be.
But it is that it's full-bodied, medium to full-bodied style. Definitely has some grip, as you say. The tannins are evident. They are there, but they are ripe and they're beautifully integrated. And the fruit just sort of carries over there. So it's not that really drying character that we get from the tannin, but we get those wonderful fruit characters. I think that's terrific on its own. It's a beautiful start. A very high bar that we set for the rest of the wines as well.
Yeah.
But a terrific beginning.
Little tip for you readers, don't wear a white shirt when you're tasting Tannat.
You've got me nervous. I'm not far off that colour.
I think you were brave last time when we were doing the fine wine tasting last month and you're wearing a white hoodie. So there we go, lesson learned. We're going to move on now to wine number 2, made by the same people. So this is made by Chateau d'Edy. And this is called Odé d'Edy. There's a lot of eddies and oddies and iddies going on around here. Odé is the French word for an ode. I guess if the bigger, bolder Madirans are maybe the epic poem, then the ode is the second wine, the sort of lead in, the introduction to the one, the shorter format to the main event. It's still a Madiran in its own right, however. We're talking 100% Tannat, as we said. And the vines are situated here. So these are all in the Madiran appellation on their own estates. So some of the previous one, the grapes would have been bought in from the Béarn, etc. This is in their own estates. And if we can just let's move on. Let's just do a quick slide share for you. Just there we go. Gil's just going to bring that up. Here we go. This comes from various slopes characterized, as Gil was saying, by different soil compositions. So while the base is it's all clay, there's a clay and limestone in the terroir de Saint-Lanne. There's clay and glacial gravel in the terroir of Edy around the chateau itself. And then there's up on the top, in the top area, the higher area, clay and sort of rounded pebbles, sort of a raised riverbed from previous up in Montcaup. The grapes, from a vinification point of view, well, this smells delicious. They're hand harvested, and vinification is carried out separately for each parcel. So depending on each vineyard plot and each area, it's all vinified separately. Before fermentation, they do some cold maceration at about 10 degrees, just sort of so the skins, they leach their color and their tannins, but softly, not too much. And then so that's about 3 to 5 days in barrel, and then there's a further 30 days of normal maceration and fermentation at 25 degrees centigrade. So it is all temperature controlled, and that the extraction. When you want to get that color out, you can do various techniques from just leaving it, or that's the minimum technique, or punching down. So actually getting up the top of taking the top off the vat and actually smacking it down with wooden beaters, or that can be done mechanically as well. But if you like the more gentle one of getting tannins and colors out of it, but within a nice gentle way, is to pump over. So you take the wine from the bottom and you just take a hose up and you pump it down and sprinkle it over the cap, and it takes on its color and its softer tannins that way. And that's what they do here. It's aged for 24 months, and in those older oak barrels, and then it's bottled, and I think it's absolutely lovely. If you like, it's an introduction to Madiran. Gil and I had the fortune a couple of weeks ago of having a tasting and a dinner with Antoine Véry, who's the winemaker at Chateaux Bouscassé and Montus, Madiran. Very rich and big, particularly the Montus, a big one. So this is a sort of lighter version of that, but it's a fabulous introduction to that.
Best match with my carpaccio.
Nice one, Colin. Yeah, to me, it's actually got a bit of meatiness and a bit of a savoury edge to it as well. I think there's definitely something going on.
I was just trying to look at the vintage again, sort of remind myself of, because it's got this wonderful purpley blue kind of tinge to it. That's a very youthful wine still. So this will age. What did we say the drinking?
We're talking about 2030, I think. This one, that sort of time. I mean, I think that's probably underestimating. But then, as we know, the Wine Society, we are traditionally conservative in our drinking windows, because we prefer our wines. We don't want to wait too long. If the wines go over the hill, then that's a waste. So try them young first, and then just keep popping back to them if you're lucky enough to have some bottles. I think you're right. Peter is saying the Odé is much more typical, worth the extra £4 compared to the two cows, the Deux Vaches. Yeah, I mean it's right, and it's from the Madiran heartland, as opposed to the Béarn next door. But I think with your carpaccio, it would be great. They actually recommend traditional French dishes. So down there, you're talking cassoulet, etc., the sort of richer Pyrenean dishes, but also roast lamb or a beef bourguignon is actually, which is, they come all the way down the south and they talk about Burgundy, but that's the beef rather than the wines. Don't know what you think, Gil.
I love that.
Yeah, it's great.
Love it.
Delicious.
Absolutely love the wine. And there's a nice sort of segue perhaps there from the Odé being that more typical Tannat, the typical Madirans, to possibly the Uruguayan wines that we'll come to in a few moments. For the Uruguay, as we were discussing earlier, just with the particular clones and the particular varietal, but we'll get onto that in a minute. But hopefully our two Uruguayan offerings show a little more of that typical style that we're used to. Yeah.
No, good. Okay. Shall we, talking of Uruguay, shall we go transatlantic?
Let's hop across
see what happens. I'm just going to bring up the Uruguayan map.
It's all ready for you.
Thank you very much. Here we go.
And so to our first of two Uruguayan wines, our wines 3 and 4. This is the De Lucca Tannat Reserve 2024. And yes, Uruguay, as we said, the Uruguay has actually been producing, or wine has been cultivated and production for about 250 years. But it really was in those 19th century when those Basque immigrants came across, especially with Tannat, that it started, certainly commercially, that started to take off. So it's a little younger in that respect to its neighbors, its larger neighbors in Argentina and in Chile. It's actually the 4th largest South American or wine producing nation of South America, with Brazil being 3rd, to Argentina, Chile, Brazil, Uruguay. I think it goes in that order.
Yeah,
I believe.
Yeah.
And as you were saying, when we think of Uruguay, we can't talk Uruguayan wine without thinking Tannat, and we can't talk Tannat without thinking Uruguay, because like Chile with Carmenere and Argentina with Malbec, they are synonymous and they are intrinsically linked. But as I mentioned a few moments ago, in terms of that kind of traditional style, a lot of the current, or certainly some of the older vineyards within Uruguay, as you just continue to clean up.
That's right. A little bit of delicate foot movements just to mop up the wine just below my chair. Carry on, sorry.
Thank you. Yes, a lot of the older, more established vineyards in Uruguay are direct descendants from those pre-phylloxera vines that were brought over in the 19th century. So, in effect, those wines being produced from those vineyards are actually the more traditional French version,
sort of
how they would have been.
The authenticity.
Yes, and so the more modern French style, where it was high tannin, really strong, robust, muscular styles of wines. Actually, the Uruguayan styles are a little bit softer, lighter in that. Still medium full tannins, definitely, but that little bit softer, a little lighter. But of course, more modern vineyards being planted in Uruguay are bringing some of those more modern French clones. So they've got this opportunity to blend and to experiment a lot more in their
best of both worlds, really.
Exactly that. And there's a lot of excitement. I'm very excited to sort of watch Uruguay and many nations, but Uruguay is definitely one that I've been sort of personally tracking over the years, and the quality of the wines produced is exceptional. But as we can see from the map here, just before we move off from it, most of the wine, most viticulture in Uruguay is in the Canelones area, just in the bottom there. So you if you can circle, about 60% of all viticulture and vineyards are planted in that region.
It's only about 25 kilometers from Montevideo, the capital. Yeah.
Yes. And it's here that we have, unsurprisingly, perhaps the De Lucca estate. They're just over on the very western edge. They're in an area called El Colorado. And it is, I've forgotten his name now all of a sudden. Reinaldo, thank you very much. So Reinaldo De Lucca and his family, actually, there were two families at the beginning of the 20th century. The De Lucca and the Galerato families came from Piemonte, so the northwest of Italy, and they had already established long viticultural kind of heritage, tradition, winemaking, and they brought those skills, that expertise, and that knowledge with them to Uruguay in the early 20th century. And Reinaldo is the current director of De Lucca. His daughter is also very much involved in the day-to-day running of the estate, Agostina. But Reinaldo is a sort of self-confessed passionate wine academic. He's got, I believe, 3 degrees from 3 separate universities all around enology. So initially Montpellier, and then Penn State in the US, and then Montevideo in Uruguay as well. A meticulous perfectionist, beautiful wines produced. You've met him.
I have met him on several occasions. He's been to the occasional Wine Society tasting as well. He's got a real personality. He's one of these pocket dynamos, really. He's got a fantastic personality, and I think we've got a picture of him coming up here, actually. If you want to just go back to that, and we'll. There we go. He's a great guy. I do remember in particular we did a growers tasting in Bradford, and it was full of South American tastings, and we arranged a little corkage deal with the restaurant up the hill. And I think the guy expected us to be bringing 1 or 2 bottles, but the first person to burst in through the door was Reinaldo with 12 bottles on his shoulder, straight in. So we had to sort of smooth over a relationship to say, well, we will be drinking a little more than 2 bottles. I think he got even more irked when Reinaldo started wandering around the restaurant, and some of the members had come up to have dinner there after the tasting as well. So Reinaldo was passing the bottles round. So we had to sort of pull him back down by his braces. But he's a fantastic ambassador for Uruguayan wines. Really, really knowledgeable, really innovative. Always looking to get things better. Great guy.
So as I say, we're in Canelones, but more specifically in El Colorado, on the western edge of that region. And the estate, the De Lucca estate, comprises 3 separate vineyards, a total of 50 hectares across the 3. But those are 3 vineyards in 3 separate communities. So we've got the Rincon de El Colorado Chico, and then Progreso is the 3rd. And this is one of the oldest viticultural regions. So within, obviously, the very first was Salta,
right
towards
the
north.
map,
but not too long after that, we had traveled south, finding that sort of ideal climatic conditions. Their vineyards are only about 35 kilometers away from the Atlantic coast. So we get, as we discovered, It's a very low-lying country. There's not a huge amount of.
The tallest mountain is something like 500 meters.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it is pretty flat down around
Which,
there.
if I'm going up it, I might be different, but it doesn't seem overly high. But so it's got these wonderful conditions, not too dissimilar, as we've said, to the southwest of France and to Madiran and the region of Béarn. It's not the only grape variety that Reynard plants. There's several other varietals like Merlot, Syrah. There's some Italian varietals, of course, in there as well, perhaps from the heritage of the family, alongside some white grape varieties of Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, and Viognier. But naturally, Tannat is the heavily featured, and this is 100% Tannat from the 24 vintage. And it, as the name might suggest, that reserve, it does see a little time in French oak barrels, roughly 6 to 8 months, just again to, for me, soften the tannic structure there, integrate the tannins into the wine. And again, it's got a wonderful balance between beautiful primary fruit, a lovely kind of smokiness and a richness and a little spice coming through on this wine as well. But a terrific example of the grape.
Yeah, no, I agree. Again, that sort of smokiness, that meatiness, that savory edge as well, but fantastic. And again, it's the value for money here. You know, you're talking 12 quid for this.
Yeah.
Sweet and ripe tannins. Smoking. Quite a grip on those tannins, but really not aggressive at all. No. Really holding in there. So you can just a nice juicy steak. Then you can forgive me vegetarians, but something that's has got those sort of meat juices and that fattiness would go brilliantly with the.
But I think anything sort of high in protein, anything rich in that respect.
I mean, Tannat is a great hard cheese wine as well, as a lot of tannic wines are. Yep. There's great acidity there as well, so it cuts through that sort of thing too, which is fabulous. So that's our first Uruguayan wine. We're now going to move on to our second, which comes from the Pisano family. I think we've got a picture of the family. There they are.
Let me share.
Share the screen there. We've got it up there. Sorry. Wonders of modern technology. There they are. There's the Pisano family. So there's 3 brothers and 1 of the sons. Those of you who've been to some of our South American tastings recently may recognize this gentleman here. On the right of your screen is Daniel Pisano. So we've got viticulturalist, we've got winemaker, we've got cellar master, and we've got sales guy over here. And they are absolute personalities and brilliant people to do business with. 1870. So again, we're talking late 19th century. Don Francesco Pisano emigrated from Liguria, so the area around Genoa in Italy. And his son came along in 1914 and produced the first wine in 1924. And then his son, the 3rd generation of Pisanos, married somebody called Maria Elsa Arechea. And Arechea is very definitely a Basque name. There's an X in there. So there's still that sort of heritage, that Basque heritage going on in Uruguay. And these guys are continuing that heritage today. So you've got Eduardo, who does the viticulture. You've got Gustavo, who's the head of winemaking. You've got Daniel, who's the export. And then the younger guy in that barrel, second on the right, is Gabriel. And he's the cellar master. And they produce around about 360,000 bottles. So it's out of about 30 hectares, situated again in Canelones. They've got the original vineyard in Colorado, and then just 5 kilometers north, just over the border in Progreso. So very similar to De Lucca. They grow Pinot Noir, they grow Syrah, they grow Petit Verdot and Viognier, as well as the traditional Tannat. But it's Tannat that they're best known for. The soil here is particularly high in limestone, I think, as you mentioned. So again, it's that clay limestone thing that they got going on in the Basque Country that's going on here too. So they've got 15 hectares of low yielding, high density Tannat in the original vineyard next to the estate. And then they've got a Barrancal in Progreso. They do a kind of junior wine that we stock also, the Progreso Tannat. But this one comes from, this is the family selection Grand Reserve, and it comes from the original vineyard around the property. It's called family selection quite simply because it used to be the wine that they kept for themselves. So they have some really good patches of grapes, and rather than chugging it out commercially, we're talking decades ago, they'd keep that bit for themselves. And then friends encouraged them to say, well, maybe if you did a bit more selection elsewhere, you could make more of these wines, and maybe we could have some rather than just when we come around for dinner. And the family reserve was born. It's hand harvested. The grapes are fully ripe. The plots are the lowest yielding, so you're getting the most concentration of fruit there. We've got a question up because it's just come up. I've just spotted there. Enjoying that. Excellent, Riggansl. This is depending on the vintage, because they don't make it every year, but depending on what the vintage is, they between 6 and 12 months in barrel. This one spent about a full year in barrel before release. But it is just it's kind of their best experience. They do a very, very big wine, very oaked, the Gran Bodegon.
Yes,
I think it's called. Is that one of theirs? Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Yes. And that gets all the treatment, lavish oak treatment as well, and some fantastic. But this one, for me, this one really hits the spot as far as Uruguayan Tannat is concerned. And again, if we look at if we take a look at the data sheet that's there, I think we're price wise, I think we're doing pretty well again. We're talking 17 quid, £17.50 a bottle. Mm-hmm. So again, you've got that. It's up a notch, but it's not totally unaffordable. There's something sort of bramble. They talk about brambly fruit and robust, but something almost chocolatey about it. And I think there's something on this wine, and I'm just making sure I'm sniffing the right one. I am, but there is something. There's something in this wine that reminds me of our fifth wine, which we'll come on to in a little while. But there's something about there's a fruit character there, whereas not the sweetness, but there's something. I don't know what it is, whether it's cherries or coming out of the bramble.
I also think there's something else. There's a lovely elegance in the wine. There's something lifted that I don't know if that's a slightly more acidity that's coming through, or something almost a little floral, it's like violet.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of complexity. It's incredibly, again, as I said, rounded. It's smooth, but it has those sort of ripe plush tannins. I think we said on there firm tannins, but not drying.
Yeah,
and that's definitely.
I think that's right. And it is a wine that I think would benefit decanting, because it's really quite tight. I mean, we're talking, vintage-wise, we're talking 2023, so it is very young. I think it would really benefit from a little bit of splashing around beforehand, or just leaving in the glass and gently whiling away the hours and seeing it develop in the glass. From a food, if you're going to have it with food, they talk about grilled meats or grilled red meats. So it's perfect barbecue wine, actually. You've got the acidity, you've got the tannins, you've got the fruit. It's all wonderfully in balance. But also hard spicy cheeses like Parmesan or something like that. Things that have got a little bit of oomph to them as well. I was thinking, if you don't like those ones with oomph, then something like an old Mimolette or an aged Manchego or something like that might work as well.
Yeah.
Anything below that, anything below the serving temperature, the recommended serving temperature of about 18 to 20 degrees, which is kind of getting towards normal room temperature rather than old-fashioned room temperature, which is sort of 16 degrees that you might want your wine to be served at. The tannins really come into play when it's too cool, and you're not really going to enjoy that wine. So sort of 18 to 20 degrees, I would say, just a bit more than cellar cool, and bringing that out. But I think that's a cracking example of Tannat.
But I love as well, and we'll definitely get it with the fifth wine for obvious reasons, as you'll mention. But all four of these first, although they have that classic Tannat kind of descriptor of them, and if you were to taste these wines, they've got a similar backbone to them and a character, but they are all also very different.
Yes,
there are differences between all four of these, and it shows that variety and variability depending on where they're planting and the winemaking that goes in, and whether it has oak or doesn't have oak. That micro-oxygenation they're fascinating wines, actually.
They are. I'm always amazed at how, I suppose it's like varieties of apple or any fruit and the like, but how varieties of the same grape can just, depending on how you treat them, be so different where you plant them, etc.
Before, sorry, we've had a question that's just popped into the chat here about the addition of Cabernets in Montus and Buscasset in particular. I mentioned, but Tannat blends with Cabernets rather than 100% Tannat. The question is, do you think the addition of Cabernets is necessary to turn a very good one into a great one?
That's a very good question. I think the depending on the vintage, I think sometimes the Tannat, 100% Tannat can do very well. Antoine, when we were talking about Montus and Buscasset, was talking about depending on where it's grown, what the wine is like, what assistance it needs from other grape varieties. So they might have 5 or 10% in there. They might have 15 or 20 or even 30 on some vintages as well. I think it's purely subjective, to be honest. I mean, I like my Tannats to be 100% personally. I think though you will get some great wines at that, but equally, it's entirely up to the winemaker. I mean, I don't have huge experience of lots of Madiran tasting. I wish I did, but certainly the ones that have more Tannat in for me, they give more. It gives more distinction as well. Something a little bit different. There's lots of wines in the southwest which if you move further up to towards Bordeaux, you've got those when you go to Bergerac and the like, and Malmondé and all those places you're going up, there's lots of imitations of Bordeaux. This is definitely not one of those. No. But for me, this sits really nicely, distance-wise, it's not surprising, really nicely between Rioja and Claret. It's what you see. There's that route there. I mean, they're only Bordeaux and Rioja are what, 3.5, 4 hours apart, and this is sort of midpoint. So I think there's greatness in all grape varieties.
With regards to the Cabernet, so Cabernets being Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc, I believe Cabernet Franc is of the two is one that's being favoured a little more.
Yeah.
We're seeing winemakers, I'm sort of including myself as a winemaker, a grape grower, but grape growers, I think Antoine mentioned as well, that Cabernet Franc is a varietal of great interest to see how that's ripening in the current climates that we're having, the warmer climate. But there's lots of fascinating wines and results coming through Cabernet Franc.
And I think people are trying to make, in Madiran and other areas, they're trying to make Tannat more accessible. So while they're still making the wines that are there for the aging, they're making other wines that are more accessible. And they're either making them more accessible through micro-oxygenation, as we mentioned, or through, depending on where the vines are planted, but also the blending as well. So you could argue, actually, that the greatest wines maybe are the 100% Tannats, or the ones that for aging, and if you're putting some Cabernet Franc in there just to make them a little bit lighter, a little bit more approachable, and certainly you can see the difference. For those of you who know Buscasset and Montus, Buscasset very much the more lighter, approachable of the two. Montus the heavier and the even more age-worthy than the Buscasset. But okay, so those are our 4 wines, after 2 and 2. We're going to move on to our final wine now, which is a bit of fun. I don't know if anybody's got any in front of them, but I just absolutely love this wine. This is the Maydie, Maydie, or however you want to pronounce it. Maydie. My wife used to say Maydie because it goes perfectly well with Death by Chocolate as a dessert. So that's Maydie rather than Maydie. Yeah, let's show the slide of the wines. There we go. So again, 100% Tannat. It's from Chateau d'Edy. So we're going back to the Laplace family. Yes. But it's a sweet fortified red. Now this wine was first made by the family, this particular wine, in 1985. But its roots actually stem way back to 1941, when Frédéric Laplace, he put a few barrels away in the cellar, in the sort of family cellar at the castle and at the chateau, and he made mistel. Mistel meaning mixture, but basically, if you know Pinot des Charentes, for example, where you take grape juice, in that case Cabernet and Merlot, and then you add brandy, basically. So you just add grape alcohol to the fruit juice, and you end up with a lovely, refreshing but alcoholic mix as an aperitif. So this mistel or M for Mistel, and Eddy, so hence the Maydie. So Mistel was called Maydie then, and it was a big hit with the locals. But they carried on they preparing their wines and everything, and kind of went away from that. It was just a little sideline. But in 1985, they decided to give rebirth to the Maydie idea, but this time rather than with grape juice, actually with wine, with fermented wine. So it's they take the juice from grapes from vines which are about 30 years old. Again, from Saint-Lanne, which is and Montcourbe, so two different areas, just to make sure that they've got the right blend of Tannat, so it's not all in one particular characteristic, either all too light or too heavy or whatever. The grapes are destemmed and they're put in a wooden vat, and then they undergo cold maceration, but longer than previously. Previously we were talking 3 or 4 days. This time it's longer, and then they start the fermentation. But then they stop the fermentation, just as you make port wine or sweeter sherries and the like. When you want to stop that fermentation, so it's bubbling away, it's getting a little bit of alcohol 3, 4, 5 days in, and then wham, you lob some clear grape spirit into there, which basically the yeasts say, oh my word, have we done our job already? They keel over. There's too much alcohol in there. They can't do their job anymore. They keel over, and there's a lot of natural sugar left in that wine, and there certainly is here. And then they macerate it for a further 2 to 6 days, and then they put it into a huge 6,000 litre oak cask, and they leave it for 3.5 years. And the result is this absolute nectar, amazing concoction. For me, it's one of the wines to match with dark chocolate. I mean, you might talk of doing that with Amarone and that sort of thing, but or port, and this is effective. It's effectively a Pyrenean port.
It does have that sort of characteristic, I suppose. Different, yes, but we've got a note here. This must be about to blow your socks off at 17%. It does, for me anyway. You feel that warmth from the extra alcohol, certainly, but it's so well balanced.
Yeah,
and it's very well integrated. I'm not getting a great deal of heat, just a nice gentle warmth from that 17%, but a huge amount of again that sort of generosity, but a lot of fruit character, and they're very concentrated, and that the sweetness is there, but the acidity is also very high. So it's not cloying, it's not sickly. It's got a lovely, refreshing finish.
It's that slight weirdness of having a sweet wine that's got tannin, which is really which kind of, when you're matching it with the chocolate, when you've got the sort of fattiness of the chocolate, if you like, that tannin works there. It also works well with hard cheeses, because you've got that acidity and you've got that tannin. I love the food and wine matching on their website, actually, because they say serve it chilled between 10 and 12 degrees, like a white wine, to be enjoyed as an aperitif, which is very much the French way, sort of sweet wines as aperitif, with a chocolate dessert, powerful cheese, or while smoking a cigar. Yes. But it's almost it's a meal in itself. It's a course in itself, isn't it?
Yeah,
it really is.
Neither of us have a cigar in front of us, actually, or food for that matter. But you keep talking cheese; it's making me
sorry
to think of this with cheese.
Yeah,
definitely. But it is a fantastic wine, and unique. Unique in the region. I can't think of any other.
Sorry, I'm not spitting that one. It's the first one I've kept. I've kept down, but no, it's a delicious wine. Delicious.
Wonderful.
So, so there we have it. 5 wines, 3 from the Pyrenees, 2 from Uruguay. I hope we've managed to expand your horizons a little. If you've never had Tannat before, then this is a great way of starting it off. Do try those wines. Take a look at them. The Maydie is currently out of stock, but it's coming in soon. So I suspect, I'm not sure whether it's still the 2018 vintage, which this is, or it may be the 2019, but it is absolutely just. Actually, I'm getting what I love about this at the end of it is there's a really, really fresh, lifted finish. It's not a cloying finish. No. It's almost as if it had a really dry, high acidity red wine. Not sweet at all. That's fantastic. So it's really quite palate cleansing as well. No, it's great. Oh, you're drinking, and Andrew's just going. They're drinking the 2017, so the previous vintage. So, but it's great. It's been a constant in the Wine Society list for almost as long as I've been here. So it's at least 20 years, and it's been a constant in our wine rack as well. That's why Mrs. Murray does love a sweet wine.
Yes.
Yeah. No, it's delicious. Mr. Murray loves one too. So there we go. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. We hope you've enjoyed it. And we've got other... just a quick comment coming in there. Maybe an online piece on our new Syrian and Ukrainian wine would be fascinating. That's interesting. We'll have a word with Fiona about that one.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll do a real sort of off the beaten track sort of online tasting. That could be good. We love getting your feedback. We love getting ideas, and so keep them coming. If you've got any further ideas for online tastings, that's great. We've got some more online tastings coming up.
Yes,
I think we've got a growing one of your what goes together grows together, or the other way around. Piemonte in
indeed.
May.
Yes, we've got two more food and wine matching evenings. Yes, so May we've got what grows together goes together, focusing on Piemonte, the food and wine of the region, and then in June we go really focused in on a global staple, the tomato. So we'll have a look at 4 different dishes that are very much focused on that fruit. I'm being all controversial there. I'm calling it a fruit because I believe it is.
Well, you wouldn't put it in a fruit salad, would you?
You wouldn't, but it's still a fruit.
Okay.
And wines to pair with that, alongside many others. I think we have gin coming up as well, a gin event.
We do.
Also in May, but yes, and many more in the pipeline.
Yeah,
and we'll be online very soon.
So thank you for coming. Thank you for watching. We hope to see you again soon, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.